Right, so here I am with Rebecca Watson, loving the book, by the way, Conscious Leadership.
Thank you very much.
If only, if only we had conscious leadership, this is what I'm thinking about. So I'm fascinated to hear about you, your story, this book, who's it for? Although I think lots of people of all sorts of political parties could right now do with reading that.
Yeah. Well, who's it for? Let's start there, because I mean, my area of specialisation is coaching leaders.
Right.
But actually, this book is about waking up and becoming conscious, and that could be for anybody. I've just pitched it to CEOs and directors because this is what I know.
Right.
And I think that when somebody's in a really senior leadership position, not only do they feel quite lonely and out on a limb and quite scared, often it's really important that they get the support that they need. But also they are influencing so many people below them.
Hugely.
In the triangle. So
hugely, and we've all had experiences, haven't we, where we've worked with leaders managers, leaders, who good, bad or indifferent.
Absolutely.
Let's start off with there.
Makes a massive difference,
yeah.
Doesn't it?
And we're in an era in which leadership has so come into the fore, and where from politics, football, business, leadership and being conscious around leadership has really come into the fore and globally for a number of years. Let's start off, maybe I'd like to backtrack a little bit and find out about how did you get involved into this field of leadership? Because I know the background, the coaching background, but how did you get into this field of leading?
Well, I think, I started my career as a commercial lawyer in London.
Right.
And when I started my career, there weren't any coaches.
Yes.
We didn't know of the word, apart from people that drove coaches.
Yes, or people in sports, maybe we had the terms coaches there.
Yeah, exactly, technical coaches. And I had some good leaders and I had some bad leaders, and they made a huge difference to me.
Right.
So I personally was affected by leadership. And then I lived in Australia for a bit. I worked for a power station. Again, I was very, very young, but I was their only in-house lawyer, so I was at board level, completely out of my depth.
Right.
The young, blonde, English.
Yes.
And
female in quite still being a male world.
Yeah, we're talking 15 years ago.
Right.
So I had a baptism of fire into what boards talk about, and we're talking a $1.5 billion turnover power station here.
Wow.
And I sat on the board and I thought, I can't believe that we're spending 20 minutes talking about this. If you added the salaries up in the room, and the fear and the blame and the culture was, when I first joined, actually it was a fantastic culture.
Right.
And then the CEO got replaced and the culture changed overnight.
Right.
So I was there really experiencing that from myself.
Right.
Actually, eventually made me quite sick. So I think I just had that passion.
Right.
And
so you were experiencing all this stuff around leadership, around how focused leadership was, how strategic it was, how it was the impact it was having on people, how good it was, how effective leadership teams were, the impact on people and all of that kind of stuff, just directly there around that table.
Yeah, and how human it is, It's there's a CEO, and who that CEO is going to create the culture.
Interesting.
And what the quality of the conversation of that board is going to be the make or break of that company.
And it's really interesting what you're saying there, Rebecca, because I guess for many of us, when we've worked in organisations, and if we're not at that particular level, you have this notion of the chief executive, this all-knowing person in that boardroom, might occasionally see
they're
and so on. They're wise and all of this kind of thing. They're untouchable and so on. Absolutely. But you also bring in this human aspect of.
Well, I think that's what I really woke up, and I really thought, wow, God, I had put them on a pedestal, and I really had believed unconsciously that, of course, these leaders obviously are different to us. And then I got into that boardroom and I thought, not only are they pretty much just human,
yes,
they're also maybe confused, maybe worried, maybe lonely.
Right.
And, initially I thought it's very easy to vilify bad leadership, and so we should know better. And then I think through my own personal journey as I got older and thought, they haven't been trained properly. No one really knows what good leadership is.
Yes, and there's such a blended number of skills that you need to be in. I guess if we look at lots of leaders, their journey Some may have started out, they've learned, they become managed, they have this, this.
Yeah.
Then suddenly you've got a far broader portfolio, so there's a
Yeah.
whole different range of skills
Yeah.
that you might need to have, from being technically good. I guess it's just amplifying what may happen for many managers who become
Absolutely.
senior managers. So let's just jump very quickly in terms of your coaching journey, then back to this theme around leadership and conscious leadership. So for you then, so I guess your leader journey, so there you are.
Yeah.
What did you do? What was your leadership journey, and then how did you segue into coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I really experienced being led.
Right.
And the extreme versions of that.
Right.
And then when I left Australia and I came back to the UK, I decided that I wanted to be a change management consultant.
Right.
So
big change, lawyer, very specific skill.
Yeah, that's
great
right.
profession.
Well, when I worked for the power station in-house, I had a couple of Ernst & Young consultants reporting to me.
Yes.
We were looking at some Sarbanes-Oxley legislation that I knew nothing about, but they came in, and so we became friends, and we'd go for a drink after work, and I'd say, hey, you know, I really don't like having to draft the contract bit, or having to go and look at our banking documents to answer a question for the treasurer.
Yes.
What I really like is all of the change work.
Right.
And they said, well, actually, Rebecca, that is a job. There's a job called change management consultant. I had no idea. I said, I thought that was just, you know, getting my house in order so that I could be a better lawyer. So when they said, no, there's an actual job that helps bring in new in-house units to organisations, you know, that sort of thing. Because really what I was doing was I was setting up a new in-house legal division for this power station. Of course, they had millions of dollars worth of spend on lawyers before I got there, but what they wanted to do was funnel it all through a central unit, get cost efficiency, that sort of thing.
So there's this leadership journey, and then to this change journey, and
that I liked.
That arrested you.
So when I got back to London, I pretty quickly managed to fall into a job as a consultant. My first client was HMRC, and I was sent to...
Her Majesty's Customs and Revenue.
That's right, yeah, absolutely. And they had a programme, it was around £350 million programme that was going wrong. And a lot of our consultants were, you know, being thrown at this programme, project managers, programme managers, business analysts, and they were all coming back and saying, look, it's the leadership that needs the help and support.
So this leadership theme was coming up again.
Came back, and I thought, hey, you know, I know how to do that. I'd already done a course in NLP as a practitioner.
Yeah, neurolinguistic programming for those.
That's right. Yeah. So I'd done the basics in that, and I'd been taught how to coach.
Yes.
And I just loved it. It was just the right thing for me to be doing.
So there was something distinct about that from just purely the change project management, about that really helping people on that journey to be to be fully themselves, to feel confident, to perform better. That was
and to get leadership teams to speak to each other properly, to make some good decisions, to get hold of this program and start to lead it in a more effective way.
Maybe that's a good moment for us to jump to, again, I guess the other word in your book, the conscious bit of leadership. Because I mean, the cover here really does suggest there's a light and there's a key. It suggests some kind of enlightenment, because I guess on the conscious on one level, like, am I aware and so on, but I get the feeling from knowing you and from having some conversations with you that there's an intuitive side, there's a connected side, there's a purposeful side that's really important to your work. Once we start bringing that into equation, whilst we're aware that we need vision as an organisation, we need strategy, and we need to know who we are and what our vision is, once you start talking about consciousness in a broader way, or perhaps in a more intuitive way, or perhaps even a spiritual way, then sometimes that's a whole different ballgame.
Yes.
When did that element of your interest in leadership emerge, or when you spotted that, hang on a minute, this is what it's about. This is a big part of it.
Yeah, I think I wrote this book 3 years ago now.
Yes.
And I think it was in the writing of it that I developed myself and my thinking around this topic.
So were you quite a pragmatist before? Because the lawyer, I'm just curious again. Background as a lawyer. Leadership. getting contracts through, sorting this thing out, sorting out. But you're saying in the writing of the book around leadership, during that journey.
Well, I think it was also before. I mean, I eventually left and set up my own coaching business 10 years ago.
Right, yes.
And so I did a lot of coaching. And initially, I thought I'm going to be coaching leaders to be more motivated, do more work. And I realised that's not at all what they needed. They were already really motivated. They were already doing so much work. And it was in the coaching of these leaders that I began to really develop my compassion for them and my respect for them. And I think really I understood that they needed to connect to themselves, have trust and faith in their own intuitive decision making, and connect to what their path was in life. As soon as they were realising, why am I leading? How did I end up here?
Really powerful. I think what you're saying there, Rebecca, is really powerful, isn't it? Because that observation that very often, if we've been in an organisation, been in it for a long time, or in that field for a long time, there are skills, there are talents that we have. And that element about that sometimes when in all the noise, as I put it, often we forget that, or we're not in tune with ourselves, and therefore the confidence, may or may not word it that way, isn't there, or the clarity or the purpose, why am I here? And so then that stepping back in that space, you found that was having a real impact, and I like that bit you're saying also about that compassion for them. So it sounds as though there's something very organic happening, and that your coaching style perhaps evolved.
Absolutely.
And through just being present. Is that what kind of happened?
Yeah, I think I was bringing already the business concepts from being, quite a hardcore commercial lawyer. Obviously, I understood the bottom line of what these people are trying to do from a business perspective. But then I was merging it with much more personal development for that individual. So my coaching became much less about a tick box of, what are you spending your money on? Do you know what's happening with your IT infrastructure, etc., etc. I mean, obviously, those areas got covered, but it was much more about who is this person and how congruent are they and how much do they believe in themselves and what energy are they emitting every minute of the day.
It's so interesting because, I mean, just today I was running a workshop for entrepreneurs at that point where their businesses are growing, and of course they're leaders, and I always find that whenever you're there and you're dealing with whatever content, but there's always a moment where I always talk about the head and heart. There's always a moment once we start talking about the heart stuff, or the contrast between the head, the logical and the heart, the interest, suddenly the energy in the room shifts. Suddenly the conversation gets deeper, and then of course you're able to have these conversations about who are you, why are you here, and that purposefulness. And I wonder, maybe that's a good moment for us to kind of broaden things out and to talk a little bit about the world that we're in. At the actual time that we're talking about, there's a lot of talk around, there's been a lot of change in the UK, in the US, leadership elections, presidential election, and for a long time there's been a lot of talk about the leaders that we've had around the world and so on. And what's your personal take, your observation as somebody who works with leaders, of where we are consciousness-wise with leadership? Because
it's a great question.
Well,
look, I must have coached, I don't know, maybe 1,000 leaders.
Wow. So give us a bit of a sense of the range of the kind of places that they're in, just to give people a bit of a sense of it.
Generally, as a society in the West, we are, we're at a level of consciousness, if you like, where we are beginning to wake up. So not so much the current leaders that are maybe late 40s, my age, but the younger generation are not wanting to work for loads of money for a job forever. They are asking, they're saying, I want to work for a good leader, and they're saying, I want to work for an organisation that's doing good in the world. So I think our values as a society are changing, and actually I think that's coming from the younger generation, the next level of talent that's going to be running our organisations. And the work that I'm brought in, often to do, I did a speech recently to leaders about how to attract that talent, and I think the leaders are going to, the advanced ones, are looking to develop, to change in order to align more with the level of consciousness that, with these youngsters.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's there's one school of thought where people think, the problem is that and I don't like these general terms, but there's that thing about, oh, well, where are our younger generation? They're this, they're that, they're not conscious, they're not aware, they're not communicating and so on. But you're actually pointing out, many people are asking a lot of deeper questions about, as many younger generations ask questions about the society that they live in, but it's something you're observing.
Yeah, I mean, globally, we've had the Arab Spring. You know, we've got people now doing mindfulness meditation in schools, in prisons. We're doing things like writing books on conscious leadership. Consciousness is a buzzword that's coming. You know, this is what we're looking for. We're, as a species in the West at least, we've got our sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs met. So your basics, you know, we've got a house, we've got enough money, we've got connection with people, and then what? So a lot of people are in a luxurious position to say, I want to question why I'm here. What's my life going to be worth? I want to look back and say I did something useful, and all of that is drawing us, I think, further and further.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? And we live in a society in which very often, it's interesting about this thing that you brought to our attention, I guess, then this East and West. For a long time, I guess there's been a predominantly Western perspective on what success is, and then lots of people have been looking at thinking, hang on, are there other elements of that? And then drawing from Eastern philosophy, but globally there's been a lot of that Westernization, and then almost a loss of centeredness, and so there's an interesting tension, isn't there, going on sometimes between far more talk around consciousness, leadership and so on, and a lot of this kind of tenseness and conflict that many people might still be experiencing in the workplace. Do you think that's because lots of this stuff is bubbling up more, that there's a lot of, lots of people feel, oh, no, my workplace is awful, or this is awful, or that's,
they're not willing to live a life like that anymore. I think people are saying, I believe I can have a job that I love, and I'm going to keep searching until I get that. And, if you look at the East and the West, I see it less as a conflict, as more of an enlightenment of the West from the East. Because yoga is generating from India, and you've got a lot of the Chinese medicine doesn't differentiate between the brain and the body. We've got yin and yang concepts in the East, and I'm doing a huge amount of work at the moment with energy, yin and yang energy, and balancing, our masculine and feminine energy that's in all of us. But if you look at the West, traditionally, in the last, say, 200 years, for whatever reason, it's been very, very masculine energy, very masculine driven. And that's got us to where we are. So I'm not saying that wasn't right for them, but I think now what we need and what is happening intuitively, we're bringing more of the feminine energy, the yin, into business. We're saying, no, we need to be more collaborative, those sorts of things. So for me, and Tony Robbins talks about this, the masculine and feminine energy to rebalance your system. And I think the whole of the business world in America, in London, maybe America's a sweeping statement, probably New York and London, I'd say, Hong Kong, Singapore, these areas, the whole of that world is needing more feminine energy.
Yeah, I would so agree with that. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost as though there's a hangover of how things has been before, and then that it's that.
For sure.
And people, I think, do know when they've had that leadership which doesn't chime, and that more questioning and so on. And I wonder if it's almost like a period of time where people have had lots of exposure to stuff, and lots of people find themselves they're in a place where they're just trying to take stock of where they're actually at. Because I guess that this conscious leader journey, or the conscious journey for anyone, requires them to step back and ask themselves those questions again. Who am I? Why am I here? What are we really about? And so on. And do you have an experience of when you're introducing these concepts or discussing these concepts with leaders, that there's almost a hangover of, well, here's what I'm expected to be, or what's being presented to be about what it should be, but this is again how I'm actually wanting to be. That there's this, it's almost like a changing of the cultures, because I see a lot of the time we're not quite there yet But as you say, the buzzwords are there. There's the awareness of it there, but we're not quite there, which is where I guess the courage bit and needing those people to step up. What's your take on that?
I think that's really, you know, what you say is really wise, and you probably feel the same as me, because people think I'm a complete nut because I might stand and talk about energetic fields. They don't even know what I'm talking about, and the male and female energy and balancing that. And, you know, and spirituality, I can't even say that word. You know, I'm a very spiritual person, and a lot of my coaching and my work is coming through me.
So you're saying, this is fascinating, are you saying that sometimes on the one hand, that's not the narrative that people have been hearing, or that it's not technically, it's not the words that would normally be in that book, but you go in and you present it, because that's been been kind of part of my experience, that you go into a room and that there's this thing about, I've always felt that life's a little bit like The Emperor's New Clothes, the story of The Emperor's New Clothes. The Emperor's naked, but everyone's, you know, that. And so you go in, and then, and what my observation is that very often, once you begin to talk to people about these other concepts, suddenly begin to, and then they can really engage, and then even bring in other elements. But there's that thing about, am I allowed to, and I guess that maybe we're the allowers.
I think it's the labelling, you know, because I've come from that hardcore business world, I know how people are going to view me if I come too much from the other world of spirituality, and I'm using
energy flow,
all of that. You know, we traditionally have split those two. So we've either had your corporate lawyer, who's about the hard physical stuff you can see. They don't believe in anything that can't be proved scientifically.
Measured,
money, conscious, all that conscious. Then we've had the other world, which is being the other extreme, which is, you know, hippies talking about fairies, and, you know, and the two worlds don't really appreciate each other. So this is what I'm trying to do in my work. I'm trying to bring the wisdom of these two worlds, not, you know, talking about fairies in the boardroom, but, you know, I'm trying to talk about how do we bring the wisdom of these two worlds together. You can't coach a CEO purely on the energetic field that he or she is creating. You have to ask them about what's the point of your business, what are your products, and how are you making your money. The two have to come together. So,
and it was so interesting when you were saying that. You know, the thing that suddenly came to me, and I was just thinking about that time, for example, when you were talking about being in Australia, and I just thought, you know, you've got an energy company, let's say in Australia, and then you've got juxtaposed with this very rich, wise, indigenous people, where a lot of it's about outside environment, energy, and so on. So one of the things that's really interesting is, isn't it, there comes a time when the material and the energetic and so on, that there does need to be a kind of dance with them, because they do exist, isn't it? That you might have those people in that place who do, but, you know, it's interesting. It's almost as though also in that setup that you mentioned there, that you've got money, this productivity, but then you've got resources over here. There's the environment and so on, and actually that's what we're working with. So they're not so disparate at all, isn't it? Once we begin to bring it, absolutely,
in a very complex system. I think that's exactly it. And also, you know, as companies, we're now realising that our human, you know, the resources of the people, our talent, is the value of that company. Now, we get it theoretically, but we don't really know what to do with it. I
was going to ask you on that particular point, because I was just thinking that somebody might be watching this and thinking, actually, I really like what you're saying, Rebecca, it chimes with me, but my experience in my company is that leadership's awful. It's cold, it's callous, I'm not respected, I'm not being able to give any flexible work, I'm not respected in the thingy, I'm expected to do more and more and more, I'm expected also to be on the go and all of this kind of stuff. What's your, and also I guess maybe also when it comes to the development, lots of the times there's development for people at the top, or the people seeing this, but they're not at the ground level. What's your observation of where, therefore, businesses are right now in terms of the, I guess there is more of this in the consciousness, isn't there? From being that people are doing mindfulness, or that people might be doing yoga, or more aware of work-life balance, but yet that real rounded organisation. From the perspective when you're going to there with leaders, where do you feel that we're at, and if there are particular places of blocks? Because then there's also other things like equality, gender, race, sexuality, and so on. All of these areas are blocks where the consciousness flow hasn't quite flowed out. What's your take when you go into those rooms where people are, and how ready and what's going to be required to see more of that roundedness?
I think we're just waking up.
Right.
I think, we have just opened our eyes. We're still in bed.
Yes, I like that
We haven't
analogy.
even begun our day.
Like that.
But I think that's exciting.
Yes.
I think that my clients find me. There's probably 90% of CEOs and boards that would not work with a coach like me. They are finding coaches that are more like them.
Yes.
Because you have to. If there's this pace and lead concept in coaching, you have to pace first before you can then just sort of lead, if you like. And if I'm already so far in their mind, wacko off the scale, that's going to turn them off. And I think that happens a lot for me. And I've had to say, do you know what, I am who I am, and I have to have the courage to speak my truth and know that there's a very small percentage of clients at the moment that would choose to work with me, because it's probably quite frightening. However, I do think, again, that the younger generation are already there. So more and more clients that I'm getting to work with are in their 30s. And I think that these people will vote with their feet. They're the old, big institutional organisations where power is being clung to from the top for their own gain and change is being resisted. Those companies won't exist. They cannot. It's almost, the consciousness of the world is changing, and if you can't adapt, it's the Darwinian survival of those that can adapt.
It's a really interesting area, isn't it? And it might be an interesting talk for another time. And I think that there is that many people might be aware of that. It's almost as though as you describe that, there is almost in that thing, there's almost like an apparent polarization between that. I like that description, that clinging to power and so on. We've seen it here in the UK recently through certain elections and so on.
We're seeing
we're seeing those extremes and extreme, all of that kind of stuff. What's your, just before we close, are there any tips for leaders, chief executives, senior staff who've listened to what you've said and they're mindful about this? I mean, for example, I'm just thinking about some environments that I've worked in, NHS, all sorts of environments where people are more mindful about, and the places where people have got to be people-centred or compassionate, and some of these things will be in their values. And that's another interesting thing, isn't it? Lots of organisations got them in their values, but does it actually really seep through down to practice? But for somebody who's watching this and thinking, actually, this is a journey I'm wanting to go on for myself and for my organisation. Are there any general tips that you would say, especially if they perhaps feel that their voice, like yours sometimes, that theirs is the only voice at that moment, and that they may not be able to have a dialogue with that with their board or with other people, or or even the managers, senior management team that they've inherited? Any thoughts or tips for those people on that journey?
I think if you're wanting to influence, if you're wanting to stay in your system, in your organisation, and influence, then the best way is to just get really clear on who you are and your vision, and not to try and preach and push, but to simply ask the question, to find where's the pain and the suffering caused by the current way of operating, and to be there to help, if you can, alleviate that pain and suffering. The way into change for me is that I know the first question I'll ask is, what's not working? What's keeping you awake at night? And it doesn't really matter what the content of that is. It just means that somewhere the world is reflecting back that this isn't the right way, this isn't the best way. Something
really interesting and powerful about that in a way, isn't it? Because if that person's able to come from that compassionate space, it might mean that there's a dialogue that's easily able to have, isn't it, at a very high level about that. And
if someone came to me and said, Rebecca, you really need to get more enlightened and you need to stop drinking wine and go to yoga more often, you know, initially I hear you, I get that, but it doesn't really help me, and I may actually be quite defensive and say, well, hang on, who are you?
Well, I also get a sense there from that there's a thing about that if you're working in an organisation and there's teams and there's people, that unless there's a way of connecting with that in a way, as you're saying, that isn't with what's keeping them awake and what their concerns about, almost like on that real human level of awareness,
then compassion,
because otherwise you can't get people on your side. And presumably there's also a thing about being very clear to those leaders about actually, again, why is this organisation here? What is it that we're trying to do for our customers? That has got to be in that, and not to be afraid of that.
Yeah, the purpose of business is to contribute to the world. Right. Once you get that, you know, a lot of board work that I'll do, I'll say, you know, I'll record in their first board meeting the number of minutes they spend talking about money, the revenues they're going to make, they expect to make, what they have made, and I'll say to them at the end, look, are you in the business of making money? And they'll say, yeah, we've got to make money. And I say, no, unless you're actually printing money, you're in another business. What is that? And to have trust and faith that if you focus on what we're going to do for the world or our customers, how are we going to improve people's lives, and trust that the money is an indirect flow back to you when you do that. It's just like energy. If I do something good for someone, I just get this feel good. Money's exactly the same.
It's a really nice moment to begin to wrap that up, isn't it? Because I think that in terms of that conscious leadership on any level, it does make somebody ask, well, actually, what is conscious, what is leadership, and what is the purpose here, and how is it that I'm able to add value? Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been great speaking to you. So your book, Conscious Leadership, if people are trying to find you, Rebecca, what's the best way for people to find you? Somebody's perhaps watched this. Is there a website, or what's the best way for it?
Probably my website, bromptonassociates.com. Is my corporate website.
Excellent, I like that, because I love the cover there, Brompton Associates, so one can then get through to that. I like that, yes. Yeah.
Or just emailing me directly, rwatson@bromptonassociates.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I love the energy of the. You know what? Just to say, I love when books. I kind of absorb things energetically. So I like when a book. You know, it's almost as though with some books, I could almost do that.
Yeah.
And I'm able to read them. Do you know what I mean?
Can you teach me how to do that?
But do you know what I mean?
That's brilliant.
You know, but just to do that, and then just sit. But so thank you so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom, and your journey. But just before you go, actually, I want to ask one last question. So for you, what's the next for you in your work? You've talked about that whole rich journey from being lawyer to coach, leadership coach, and so on. For you, how would you like things to evolve in your life, in your work? What's next for you?
Well, I think my very, very big path is probably to run retreats. So I have another business which is running yoga retreats in Spain, but I'd really like to bring the leadership together and start. I used to run leadership retreats, and I really like to start doing that again. And because I think people, when you're away from your environment, it's very easy. You know, I go in, I coach someone for 1.5 hours at their desk. But when you're out of London, which is a huge energetic field anyway, and you're somewhere, you know, up a mountain overlooking the sea.
Well, wonderful. Well, I hope that lots of those leadership teams get in touch with you for that, precisely that, after that. Thank you so much, and take good care.
And you.
Thank you. Excellent.